Hey, Dan?
Okay.
I tried.
Let's call this meeting in order. Could you have a roll call, please?
Matt Simpson,
Here.
Michael Biddle, Mike Wild,
Mike Wald is on the phone.
Nick Cremano,
Here.
Jenny Sullivan,
Here.
Bruce Ferguson,
Here.
Craig Leggett,
Here.
Brian Campbell,
Here.
Dan Bruno, Dave O'Brien.
Here. Yes, understood. So in terms of the special meeting, this is strictly about acquisition of industrial property. We will be holding this in attorney-client privilege meeting, so it will not be open to the public except for members of the board or officers of the IDA, which Lester is part of it. But before we start, because there's been some questions about the funding of the bridge and people are confused about that, what they seen in the paper. So a couple members of the board asked me to have them explain what how the funding for the bridge would take place, because it may affect our decision to acquire the piece of property we're talking about. So Laura, could you help us understand, please?
I'll give it a shot. Okay, so just to let everybody know, there are several sources of funding that would potentially work to get this done. And I'm going to kind of go through what I evaluated in what order so that we can get a picture as to where we are right now. The URI funding, which is the most likely avenue to go, is essentially funding, it is New York State funding that is leftover funding from about 5 years ago. The state had a competition in which there were a specific set of rules and all the counties competed for a pot of money. 3 counties got $500 million, and then the rest of the counties got sort of what we all call the consolation prize. So this funding is a little bit different than most other states, and certainly from federal funding, because the money did not come from state taxes. Where it originated, if you all think back post-recession to what I call the era of banks behaving badly, there were an enormous amount of fees and fines that were attached to these banks. The state then took that money, and that was what funded the URI competitions and then the pools of money. So the way they're handled and administered is a little bit different from most other grant programs because of that. So the Capital Region has some URI funding available. It does not have a specific prescribed match amount, because the way the original funding applications work is the state is trying to leverage overall a 5-to-1 public-private investment. So when you say 5-to-1, you normally think, well, that kind of means a 20% match. But what they do is they take all the URI projects in the state and compile them and say, as long as everything together meets that 5-to-1, Some projects have zero match and some projects have a 90% match. It depends on the project, and it's essentially up to the applicant to sell the project. So we are right now in the process of working on potentially completing an application to get funding in for that, which would allow us to ask for what is the current estimated cost of replacing the bridge, which including demolition, as we're anticipating, is about 1.3 million. So another source of funding, so again, if this happens, that money right there would be sufficient to fund the entire project in terms of replacing the bridge. If there's other needs on the site or the road, that would be different, but this gets the bridge issue taken care of. Northern Borders is another funding pot that is also federal funding that goes through the regional planning board. It would allow an ask of up to about $500,000. That would actually have, based on the eligibility of Washington County, would require about a 20% match, but Northern Borders funding can also potentially be matching the other federal funding if more was needed to increase the scope of the project. So those applications are not out yet. They do have a specified timeline. They're normally due somewhere around May, and awards are somewhere around July. So if there's a need as this process goes on to ask for that funding, the application, there's still time to do it this year.
Or would this funding come from, is the IDA the lead on getting this funding at that point, or is the county the lead on getting this funding?
So the rule is that the applicants are a little bit different from all of these grants, but mostly a unit of local government, or so a local government, or what's designated as a unit of local government, in some cases a nonprofit, etc. So IDA is possible. It just depends on the specific grant application. So the build are federal grants, and again, it says state, local, and tribal governments, so or a subsidiary thereof. The build grants are not yet out. I anticipate that they will be out fairly quickly. So I'm going to do this. There are actually two federal highway grants that are fairly similar in terms of what they offer. One of them is the build grant, and the other one is called infra. The difference between them is that the infra grants are largely meant for large, nationally transformative projects, whereas the build grants are intended more for local or regional projects. The build grants, the minimum ask on that would be $1 million. Normally, based on this region, the match would be 20%, but based on poverty rates, we would be eligible to request up to 100% funding. Again, it doesn't mean they have to grant it, but potentially build could cover 100% of the cost. Infra is somewhat similar, but the minimum ask on infra grant is $5 million. So again, these are generally meant for slightly larger projects. Both of these grants, the dewatering facility would be a fit for. Normally with federal highway grants, you have to have a federal aid eligible highway. But what this site has that makes it eligible is the fact that it's an intermodal facility, i.e. you've got rail and you've got potentially shipping down to the Port of Albany. So because of that intermodal accessibility, the site would be eligible for both. So again, we're talking right now about the funding for the bridge, but as this discussion progresses, should this project wrap up into something larger, these grants are generally open on an annual basis. So even if we were to start with getting the bridge addressed, that doesn't mean that as the site continues to get developed, you could then potentially go back and look at these other funding sources to do further development, or they could be part of the upfront ask. Another federal one is the US EDA, which is, this is an economic development grant as opposed to an infrastructure grant. An EDA grant always requires that you provide a project beneficiary in terms of who's creating the jobs and how many are you creating. The infrastructure grants don't require that, but they are more competitive if you can show that you are creating economic advantage in an area. So EDA, these grants would be due by September. I will also tell you that we have toured EDA representatives on the dewatering the site. They like the site, especially since Fort Edward is in an opportunity zone, and EDA is trying to get some opportunity zone projects under their belt. The thing here, so the award ceiling on the EDA grants is 1.5 million. However, they are a 50-50 match. But again, it would be possible to match either a URI or a Northern Borders grant with a US EDA grant. So, and the other thing that just to comment is that the federal budget right now includes some fairly significant proposed increases for transportation infrastructure over the next few years. So beyond what I've talked about, that scope could potentially enlarge even more. But bottom line, it is possible if we are able to secure the URI funding just to get the bridge done and using the matched value of the lands that WCC would be donating without the applicant, i.e. the county, the local town, whoever the applicant is, without having to put up any cash. It's also possible using some of these other funding sources to have one match the other. So overall, funding the project in some way or another, while it might be a little bit complicated in terms of constructing it, it's eminently feasible.
I think a lot of our interest is in development of property because there are some needs in terms of the sewer and gas coming in, development of property. But I'm glad to get that explanation because I haven't had that full explanation either, and I'm sure some of the other board members were curious also.
Right, and so for example, the EDA grant, EDA cannot touch infrastructure that is not owned by a local municipality. So one of the conversations was, what if we wanted to get natural gas up at the dewatering facility? EDA cannot touch that because gas infrastructure is owned by grid. EDA, however, could be a potential source if you're looking for, upgrading the roads further, for wastewater, for broadband. There's a lot of power on the site that maybe you want more. But again, EDA has to specifically be tied to a project. The two federal road grants would not be able to be used for other infrastructure. They don't have to be tied to a specific job creating project, but they will be more competitive if they are.
So the one the county is looking at applying for bridge funding, that has to be tied to the project, correct?
Yes.
And as for some of the funding sources available, they still need a project will greatly enhance the ability to get funded, competitiveness. And so the risk is if we don't get an anchor tenant there, we're going to have the road and still the challenges of how we're going to get that road accepted and move forward.
Correct.
Any questions for Laura? I think she was very succinct in what she did. What she said, I think it pulled a lot of things together for me. Mr. Biddle.
Mr. Chairman, just for clarity's sake, the last grant you were talking about, was that the URI?
UIR.
URI, Upstate Revitalization Initiative. I know, acronym.
Okay, fantastic. And with that was the one, for clarity's sake as well, that incorporated, I think you used the words poverty level or the economic need area. The URI doesn't have a specific requirement for that. Okay.
No, but the URI is going to be very focused on economic benefit justification, i.e. the job creating.
Right.
And again, there's no prescribed formula, but it's gonna be better perceived if you're demonstrating why this project is so critical to the area.
And then with that URI, and first of all, the amount of work and time and research you put into this has been fantastic. So thank you for all of that as well. You've put up with a lot of phone calls and questions from a couple of us here on the board, so thank you so much for your patience and
You're welcome.
diligence. As far as the URI goes, is there the ability to throw in that ongoing maintenance of the road is part of, meaning we would have to keep maintenance going? Is that part of a well-being to the grant of, or are there any others? I'm not trying to reach here, I'm just trying to be clear.
So your question is, if the county took the road and the county applied for the UIR, they could apply for other types of assistance with road building, is that?
So again, we have an estimated cost right now of about $1.3 million to first do the demolish or deconstruction of the existing bridge and replace it. So that is what's on the table right now in terms of the grant application. So what I'm looking at and what I asked Mr. O'Brien to look at is what are the allocated costs that go with the replacement of the bridge. So for example, there's a $20,000 investment that the IDA has to make to move some power over. So I'm going to include that as part of the cost.
That's my,
And
those
anything
things
that's
are my point.
specific to getting the bridge done, I've asked Mr. O'Brien to give me some numbers on, and I'm going to include that as far as the total project cost. And the total project cost will also include the cost of acquisition of the parcels that have to be turned over to the entity owning the road, the county, whoever it ends up being. So that becomes that public-private partnership, and that we're using the value of that donation as the match that we're then going to be demonstrating that we've got a public-private partnership with it. But i.e., it adds, so we're going to add the cost of that to the overall project cost.
Great, thank you. I guess just for the benefit of our board too, that so many times, I just want us to have the realization too, that so many times when you apply for grants for infrastructure, we still have to realize, depending on who takes the road, there's maintenance costs, there's other costs, ongoing costs to go with that. I'm not saying that that's a deal killer by any means, just the realization.
I think that the evaluation of the road system within the site has to be looked at also, because that potentially could be, if we need to put money in for that or other things, there's a scale that needs to be replaced if we're still doing business with granary. That should be included in there, because that would be cost the IDA for acquisition of that. We hope to eliminate the generator rental by doing the power. We still evaluate that. I got a proposal, but we do need to do according to our bylaws and our procurement policy, we need to put that out to bid, because it's more than $10,000. It's actually more than $5,000. So we need to put those out to bid, but the first part we have to be comfortable with is that we have a project coming in to help us out. So we can, in the county and whoever decides to take the road, whether it be the towns or what, we can get funding for this and make our potential customer happy. So satisfied with it. Brian?
With that being said, taking care of the road, who's taking care of it right now? I know it's plowed when it came by.
Actually, Canal Corp currently plows the road.
I
I just found that out, Canal Corp. I just found that out yesterday.
So I mean,
We're actually doing something?
well,
They don't do a very good job on it when I'm told, but,
no, but the fact of the matter is they still have to get in and out of there so they could keep plowing the road as long as they're using it.
that's gonna be up to whoever takes the property. Notice,
I mean, they still need to get in.
Bruce?
Somebody, we have an abbreviated version of Laura's presentation in writing.
I just was going to ask
Send
that.
me out.
I'm sure I can put something together for you.
Appreciate it.
And when you do that, put your thoughts together, and which was better, what in your thoughts, like, can you do that? Can you decide if it were you, that you would do this because of this?
As long as somebody tells me who's gonna own the road and when they're gonna own it.
Okay.
And you
That's a
can,
$25,000 question.
and the other thing is you guys want that emailed probably sometime during the week, so you get a chance to look at it before Monday's meeting.
I would like that.
I
I don't want
think
to
that's-
overload you.
I think that's what he was after is.
I can give you a summary of these opportunities, but I can't make, other than the fact that we're standing by ready to do a URI grant specifically for the bridge. I can't really come to conclusions as to what's best until I know exactly what we're trying to
So
accomplish.
thank you. Any
Yeah.
further questions? Needs to go into executive session or attorney-client to discuss?
I think you're right the first time. I think it has to be executive session because I think an attorney private privilege, don't we? Isn't the attorney supposed to do most of the talking in that?
Yeah, we're gonna discuss the topics that, regarding the acquisition of the property, et cetera.
Yeah, so why wouldn't we do that in executive session so we can all take part too? I think there's a distinct difference.
The board can take part in the attorney executive.
You can talk during the executive, you can speak during the attorney.
Should we do everybody but Brian?
Doesn't make it easy for me.
Second, Mr. Simpson, second.
Yes, Bruce?
Because it says in Washington County, after disagrees strongly with Dick's request, I don't think you should be asking.
I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I'm looking for a comparison.
All I want is in writing, a little bit of description of these
Yeah.
different grant possibilities and.
And I don't want you to misunderstand me. I don't want you to make our decision for you. I just like to see
Good,
it.
it's not
Well,
gonna happen.
I don't think we should be asking her that.
Well, I didn't mean to ask it that way. I just need a comparison,
Right, right.
because I'm Italian.
I do have an apology to make, not really an apology. We did do notice, proper notice. The website had a lot of updates last week, and unfortunately, we can't get in there to post anything. The individual's coming back tomorrow to help resolve the issues. And according to, open meetings law, post on the website is available. At this point, it's not available. It's our customary practice to post everything on the website before a meeting. This, we didn't have the capability at this point. So I just wanted to be open with that.
Any more questions, Jim?
Okay, before we go into executive session, I would like to have the opportunity to say a few words. May I help matters?
We have a time limit of 3 minutes, Phil?
Yeah, right.
We do have a time limit of 3
This is a
minutes.
serious matter.
Phil, we have a bylaw.
Judge here for many years. This attorney here for many years. Member of the town.
Phil, you have 3
For
minutes.
many years. And being involved with
You
this.
have 3
I
minutes.
don't like the idea of you trying to shove it up here. I would like to say a few things. And as a citizen of this county, I feel that it's relevant. And I think you're putting the cart ahead of the horse. And I would like to be able to go up there and say a few words.
You have a time limit. We have 3 minutes, passed by the board.
Okay? The reason that I'm here is because I'm really ticked off with what's going on. And I have no personal vendetta against anybody. To get the IDA involved in this matter is ridiculous. I have said right from the start, there's a procedure that we have in Washington County as you do in Warren County. When somebody doesn't pay their taxes, you foreclose. As in Warren County, once you start the foreclosure proceeding, you have what is called leverage. And when somebody comes in and wants to pay their taxes and wants to wheel and deal, they know either they make a fair agreement or the property is going to be sold. That wasn't done here in Washington County. It's one of these things, check in the mail. And even by Pony Express, it doesn't take months and months to get the taxes paid. My concern is what I saw in the paper yesterday, is that not only, this is getting worse and worse. This is pure, simple madness. What is happening now is that the assessor in Fort Edward has changed the tax status of the property from to non-exempt. And meaning that on the tax status day of March 1st, there'll be no taxes owing on the property. What that means is that And this is far out to assume at this point, but no one wants to discourage any business, any corporation like the plastic company from coming in. But the chances under the present circumstances of this plastic company coming to Fort Edward is pretty nil. There is no access to the property. There is no right of way to the property. You heard a comment from one of the attorneys, and they're all good attorneys. And all the attorneys said, in plain English, was they will give a right of way. And no one wants to interpret what giving a right of way means. But giving a right of way does not mean necessarily for free. When you own property and you say to somebody, I'll give you a right of way over my property, I in my law office have dealt many times with people who are paid for the right of way. But nobody wants to bring up the subject. The only reason I bring this up is everybody's in fairyland about this whole thing and not getting to the specifics. We have in this county a very bad policy. I'm not here to criticize anybody. But when a widow who owns $10,000 on property that's assessed for $100,000 and is told you owe 3 years in back taxes if we won't accept part payment, what she's told and what has been happening, the property is sold at tax sale. There's a foreclosure. And then the property may be sold for whatever, 70 or 80,000, 10,000 that's all applied to the taxes, and the county keeps the rest. And their good past chairman was a pretty good chairman, so he's not on continuing. But anyway, he has said publicly, what do you want? We have to balance our budget. Well, it doesn't seem that when you have somebody in this situation, where you have all this money owing, supposedly somewhere around 800 and $500 or whatever $1,000, that's not the point. And all of a sudden, you want to make a deal. You don't make a deal with the widow, but you make a deal with other people. And to hold them as the culprits is not right. All they're trying to do is, and I disagree with this, but if they can get away with delaying the foreclosure and hopefully find a buyer for the property and pay off the taxes, fine. They're going to use the county's money to gamble. And what bothers me is the board has become now our board strictly political. It really is bad. This decision to take the property, and I can't help but feel that the Fort Edward assessor just didn't do this on the roll. What this means now is the property is exempt until next March 1st. That means that if this property is not sold to the plastic company, and I don't know now, and I'm just assuming it's one big assessment of 80 acres, supposedly about 25 acres is being sold. And I assume it's just one assessment. I don't know how, as the paper said, they can divide it up and say, well, the Juarez site is tax exempt and the rest is taxable. Any judge in this country would say that's discriminatory. All of us got to be tax exempt. And one time this property was assessed for somewhere around $76 million. The plastic company is buying the property for like $786,000, something like that. Fantastic deal. Now they're being told if you buy this property, you don't have to pay any taxes on the property for another year. What this means is there's only a limited pot that Fort Edward has to have a tax base. You're taking out all this property from the tax base. Obviously, the taxes will go up for the rest of the people. It's as simple as that. You don't have to be an Einstein for that. That means that these people don't pay their taxes. The county, it's so stupid. The county has put themselves in a position where they're going to have to reimburse the town and the village, because there's a lot of good people in Fort Edward who pay their taxes. But they've lost the General Electric. Now they're losing this. Now they're told when I say they're losing this, the Juarez site. Now they're told that their taxes are going up. The chances are very likely they're not going to pay the taxes. So the county is putting themselves further and further in the hole. And to say that the ADA, and Nick has asked them point blank, well, who's going to pay these taxes? I'd like to know. Somebody's got to pay the taxes. Normally what happens, you foreclose. In this case, when you foreclose, you sell the property. When you sell the property, somebody buys the property. In this case, I would like to see, it would be a developer who would build homes, and he would sell the homes, and the people would pay taxes, which would go on forever. I have no way of knowing, nor does anybody else in this room, and that's the purpose of the IDA, to give final financial assistance for corporations to help certain, in this case, Washington County. There is absolutely no assurance in my mind that any people hired would be from Washington County. We have Glens Falls in Warren County, we have Saratoga, and there's absolutely no assurance. No one can say here that this is going to benefit forever. I can say for a fact, taking that property off the tax rolls is going to hurt the county, forever taxpayers in mind, and all of us in the county. So I'm saying to you, for this to be talking about a road end, and let's face it, there's no way that Washington County can pay for the maintenance of that road or putting it in. It's very unlikely the state will do it, but it won't be necessary to do this. That's why I think all this should stop. The county should reconsider. That's the only reason I'm here. The county better reconsider. They better do whatever they can to get that county put back on the tax rolls, or I should say, do our insight, and go from there. I would hope that, a couple of years ago, we had in Granville, we have a TD bank, and we have a water board, and it's been very important to our community. It's been there 75 years. And our local village board was told that, in essence, that the bank property was being listed, which it was. And what they were told was that they better move the clock. And the clock is 75 years old. There's a risk of damage. I told the board they should take a deep breath. I'm telling everybody here. They should relax, take a deep breath, clear their minds, calm down, and reconsider and move on.
Okay.
And that's what I'm telling everybody here. I don't have anything else to say, but I think it's very foolish to go ahead with what's happening here. It's pure madness. The property should be foreclosed like any other property and sold, and I'm sure you'll have a buyer, and I'm sure it's more apt to be sold by the county than under the present circumstances. Does anybody have any questions on
Thank
this?
you, Bill.
Okay.
Thank you, Lynn. Charlie, good?
Thank you.
First of all, I want to commend you on offering this opportunity. This was just offered, this was just voted in, you said, when?
When we finished the bylaws up last meeting,
I know I made a suggestion, but when I listened in on the, on that first meeting, I didn't hear it.
that was done in January.
I'm glad to hear it. Okay, so, first of all,
Unfortunately, our live streaming is a work in progress, and thank you, Travis, you pointed out some things that can help, so we'll get our live streaming done, so.
Well, we all know Mr. Whitehead and appreciate him. Just for the benefit of everybody, there's millions of people watching. Travis, could you kindly state your name and where you're from?
yes, my name is Travis Whitehead, and I'm originally from Riverhead, New York. So,
Thank you, sir.
We'll
so
hold that against you.
what I'd like to say, first of all, I agree 100% with what Mr. Burke had to say there. And I hope you'll consider that. I won't get into those points again, but I'll make a couple of points that you may not be aware of. First of all, I just found out recently that the Port Edward LPDC was granted a tax exemption, which is kind of odd because they're also on a list of state agencies that are non-compliant. I'm wondering if the assessor knows this or not, but I can show you where they are having problems right now with the ADO. And they are a list, and that list is published. So you may want to talk about that. And you may want to talk about that attorney-client privilege at some point. But I would like to point out that this is a public meeting, and there are only 8 ways that you can go into executive session. from a public meeting, and attorney-client privilege is not one of them. You might adjourn the meeting and do this, but then you wouldn't be able to take any action because you wouldn't be able to come back into session without posting that meeting. So you might consider that. But now that I got can ask you here rather than from there, I was going to make a point of order on asking exactly which section, which part of Section 105 of the Public Officers Law we were going to go into executive session, but I'm pretty sure it's this one, H. And I'd like to read this. I'd like to read the whole thing because I think it's important for you to hear that before you vote on going into executive session or not. It says H. This is one of 8 reasons why you can do it. The proposed acquisition, sale, or lease of real property, or the proposed acquisition of securities or sale or exchange of securities held by such public body. Sounds like that's where you're going to be going. But there's a but there, and that was never explained even last time we went into executive session. And the but says, but only when publicity would substantially affect the value thereof. So if you believe that publicity on discussing some of these problems that have been out there for months and months and months, and we all know what those problems are with access and such, if you believe that that's somehow going to substantially affect the value thereof, then you might want to vote to go into executive session. But if not, you will be you will not be in compliance with the law if you decide to ask us, 5 or 6 people that are here, to leave the room while you discuss these issues. As I said, another option is to adjourn the meeting and do your attorney-client privilege.
So first of all, for clarification,
And I get 3 minutes too, right?
you may,
You want to clarify something?
for clarification, we'll be taking no action for that, no matter which way we go. We just need advice of counsel.
I'm happy to state my name. My name is Katie DeGroot. I'm a resident of Fort Edward. Until recently, I've been a beef farmer, so I can tell you a little bit about smell of manure. Okay, and that's what I smell here, is serious manure. I think that when you look at the amount of trouble that people have gone through here to try to do something, you have to wonder why. When the Fort Edward Local Development Corp was formed, to help WCC with WL Plastics, with DA Collins, move all these things around to bring a company to town, with serious complications and tax implications for this county and the people of Fort Edward. You have to wonder, such a complicated setup, what the reasoning is behind it. And to me, it has to do with tax evasion. Plain and simple. DA Collins doesn't want to pay the taxes, and they're going to figure out a way how to do it. They got a bunch of suckers in Fort Edward to sign on to help them figure out how not to pay taxes, and they've now passed the buck to you guys. And I think you're right, you're hearing, you should really think about this, because long term, it is wrong to give a company tax benefits, as this gentleman said, that a person who doesn't pay the taxes gets their property taken away from them. Thank you.
All right, Albert.
I don't need treatment, I'm sorry.
Two pieces of information. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Albert Nolet. I'm the Washington County Treasurer. 2 pieces of information that will be important that I need you to know based on what I just heard. Number 1, the Fort Edward LPDC was formed under Section 1411 of the Not-for-Profit Law. You can talk to Kara about what that means. Okay, that piece of information is important. Number 2, this property is not eligible for foreclosure until January of next year. And I assure you, if these taxes remain unpaid, I will foreclose on this property. Let's just be clear on that. So I've heard accusations about the county not doing its job, not foreclosing. I cannot foreclose until January 2nd, 2021 at the earliest. If these taxes remain unpaid, much like any other property in Washington County, I have every intention of foreclosing on this property, so let's be clear on that.
Al, can I just ask one
You
question?
can ask me anything, Judge.
You're doing a terrific job as treasurer, and I respect you, but let's make it clear. Last year, the county of Washington could have foreclosed on the taxes. They weren't paid.
That's untrue, sir.
What's that?
That's untrue.
That's not true?
That's not true. They owed 17s and 18s, and they paid them by March 31st. I was unable to foreclose last year.
Well, they did pay them
Yes.
then?
Yeah, out of the 1.4 million, they paid $1 million and kept out of
So
foreclosure.
we're talking about 6 or 7 months to wait for foreclosure,
Yes, sir.
right?
Yep,
It's ridiculous.
I understand that, but that's
Okay.
what I'm faced with.
You should foreclose.
Okay, I will adjourn the meeting and go into,
Well, our recommendation is to go into, the attorney-client privilege session outside of the meeting. It's outside of the scope of open meetings law. It's set forth in Public Officers Law, Section 108. Our recommendation is that you close, since there's no action to be taken, it's just an informative session for you to ask me questions, me to answer those questions. And that would be our recommendation.
Mike,
I make a motion to adjourn the meeting.
motion by Nick, or Mr. Good.
I'm not as good looking as Nick.
Do I have a second? Nick, all in favor?
It never will be.
Carried. Thank you, gentlemen, for your concern.
So,
See you, Bill, thanks.
We're gonna stay and talk to the attorney.
before you adjourn the meeting, right?
Yes, we can go
We
to,
took the other,
we're going,
By
attorney.
the way, I never heard the word substantial defined, so that is the,
I would go to.
that's,
Well, because we were back